The Mediterranean breeze carried the scent of jasmine as I watched my daughter, Emma, carefully arranging her handmade place cards on the reception tables. Each card featured delicate watercolor flowers she painted herself, a skill she'd inherited from her late father. At 7, she had his artistic touch, and unfortunately for my sister-in-law, Diane, my patience for perfectly timed revenge. "What is that child doing?" Diane's voice cut through the peaceful morning air. She stood in her white silk robe, her professional blowout already perfectly styled for her wedding day. "Those are not the postcards we ordered from Paris." I stepped forward, but before I could speak, she had already stormed over to Emma. "Oh, you must be from the staff's children," Diane said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How charitable of them to bring you along. But we can't have you playing with the decorations. Why don't you run along to the kitchen? I'm sure they have some dishes you can wash." Emma's lower lip trembled. "But Aunt Diane, it's me, Emma. I made these for your wedding." "Aunt?" Diane laughed, the sound sharp enough to draw attention from her bridesmaids nearby. "Sweetie, I know you might see our staff as family, but you can't go around claiming relations to the guests. Now run along before the real guests arrive." I watched my daughter's shoulders slump as she gathered her carefully made place cards. Every fiber of my being wanted to step in to remind Diane that this staff child was her brother's only niece. But sometimes lessons need to be learned the hard way. "Emma, honey," I called softly, "why don't you take those to Mr. Marcus? He's been waiting to see your artwork." Marcus, my hotel manager, had been briefed on today's situation. He would ensure Emma was treated like the princess she was, at least by the staff who actually knew who we were. "Mrs. Torres." Diane spun around, finally noticing me in my simple linen dress. "I didn't see you there. I trust you're here to oversee the service staff." Her smile was pure venom wrapped in designer lipstick. "Something like that," I replied mildly. "Though I must say, these place cards your staff's child made are quite lovely." "Please," he scoffed. "This is a 5-star resort wedding. Everything must be perfect. Speaking of which, I noticed you're not dressed for your position. All staff must wear the proper uniforms." I glanced down at my dress, a handmade piece that cost more than Diane's entire wedding budget. Not that she needed to know that yet. "Oh, don't worry about me. I have my own dress code exemption." "Exemption? From whom?" Her perfectly threaded eyebrows drew together. "Management," I smiled. "Now, about the breakfast service. Yes, well, ensure everything is perfect, and keep that little girl out of sight. I won't have some maid's daughter ruining my photos." I watched her flounce away, barking orders at her actual wedding planner about the imported roses not being the exact shade of blush she had demanded. Throughout the morning, I observed as Diane's true colors painted themselves across her perfect wedding canvas. She made 3 servers cry over the temperature of the champagne. She demanded the beach be swept again because she saw a single seashell out of place. And every time she spotted Emma, she loudly reminded everyone within earshot that the help should keep their children under control. My brother James, Diane's soon-to-be husband, was conspicuously absent during these displays. He was probably hiding in his suite, avoiding the chaos his fiancée was creating. He had always been conflict-averse, which was exactly how Diane had managed to wedge herself into our lives 3 years ago. "Mrs. Torres," Marcus approached discreetly. "Everything is arranged as you requested, though I must inform you that the bride has just demanded we replace all the breakfast pastries. Apparently, they're not French enough." I nodded, watching Diane berate a young server for daring to suggest their croissants were actually from an award-winning local bakery. "Let her make her demands, Marcus. Document everything." "And your daughter?" he asked softly. "Emma's fine. She's stronger than people think." I smiled, remembering how my late husband used to say the same about me. Sometimes the best lessons come from letting people reveal themselves naturally. As the morning progressed, Diane's behavior grew increasingly entitled. She had managed to convince half the wedding party that Emma was part of some charitable initiative where staff children got to experience luxury events. The story grew more elaborate with each telling, complete with dramatic sighs about how generous she was to allow such a thing on her special day. I kept to the background, watching and waiting. My phone buzzed with a message from James. "Where are you?" "Diane's telling everyone you couldn't afford a proper outfit for the wedding, so you're helping in the kitchen instead." "Don't worry about me," I texted back. "Just make sure you're in the main hall at 11 a.m. sharp." You won't want to miss what happens next. The morning sun climbed higher over the resort's pristine beaches, and with it, Diane's demands grew more outrageous. She was in her element, playing the role of the wealthy bride who had graciously allowed her working-class sister-in-law and her staff child to be part of her perfect day. Little did she know, the real performance hadn't even begun. At precisely 11 a.m., I stood in the main reception hall, watching Diane hold court with her bridesmaids. She was in the middle of explaining how she had rescued our family from obscurity by marrying James when the resort's owner liaison approached her. Mrs. Soon-to-be Parker? The liaison's professional smile never wavered. The owner would like to discuss some concerns about your special requests. Diane's face darkened. Now, I'm about to get married in 3 hours. Can't you handle it? I'm afraid not. There are some payment discrepancies that need immediate attention. I watched Diane's perfectly powdered face flush. She had been running up astronomical charges all weekend, assuming James's credit cards could handle it. What she didn't know was that I had already flagged those cards for review. Fine, she snapped. Where is this owner? I'll set them straight about how things work at high-end establishments. Actually, I stepped forward, smoothing my simple dress. The owner is right here. The silence that fell over the room was delicious. What are you talking about? Diane laughed nervously. Stop playing games and get back to the kitchen where you belong. Mrs. Parker, the liaison continued, may I present Mrs. Isabella Torres, majority owner of this resort, and 3 others in our portfolio. Diane's champagne glass slipped from her manicured fingers, shattering on the marble floor. That's impossible. She's nobody. She works in some tiny office downtown. Actually, I smiled. That tiny office is the headquarters of Torres International Resorts. We keep a low profile. It helps us see people's true characters. The bridesmaids began whispering among themselves. One was already frantically typing on her phone, no doubt Googling my name. But James never said. My brother respects my privacy, I said calmly. Though I'm curious why you thought I worked in the kitchen. Was it because of my heritage, or just your general attitude towards service staff? Diane's mouth opened and closed like a designer-clad fish. I didn't mean. Oh my God, one bridesmaid gasped, staring at her phone. Torres International. They own like half the luxury properties in. That's enough, Melissa, Diane hissed, but the damage was done. Now, I continued, pulling out a folder. Let's discuss your special requests, demanding our staff's children be hidden, making 3 servers cry, insisting we import water from the French Alps at midnight. Those services were promised. Diane's voice rose an octave. This is my wedding day. A wedding you're holding at my resort, I reminded her, where you've been treating my daughter, your niece, like an unwanted servant. The color drained from her face. Emma is, but you said you were just I never said anything, I corrected her. You made assumptions. Very loud, very public assumptions. James chose that moment to walk in. What's going on? I heard shouting. Your sister, Diane spun toward him, has been lying to everyone. Playing some sick game, pretending to be staff. Actually, James crossed his arms. My sister has been exactly who she's always been. You're the one who's been pretending, Diane. I held up my hand as Diane started to protest. You have 2 choices. Either I can cancel this wedding right now, well within my rights as the owner dealing with a hostile guest, or, Diane whispered, or you can apologize, publicly, to every staff member you've abused, to my daughter, and then we're going to have a very serious discussion about your future behavior as part of this family. The bridesmaids were now openly recording everything on their phones. Diane's carefully crafted society wedding was quickly becoming the exact kind of spectacle she'd hoped to avoid. You're bluffing, she tried one last time. You can't just. I picked up my phone. Marcus, please begin the shutdown procedures we discussed, and make sure everyone receives their cancellation bonuses. Wait, Diane's cry echoed through the hall. I'll apologize. I raised an eyebrow. To everyone? She nodded, defeated. Starting with Emma, who, by the way, spent weeks making those place cards you threw away. As if on cue, Emma peeked around the corner, still clutching her handmade cards. The look on Diane's face as she realized just how badly she'd misjudged everything was worth every second of restraint I'd shown. What followed was what the staff would later call the great humbling of Diane Parker. My soon-to-be sister-in-law, still in her wedding gown, personally apologized to every server, housekeeper, and kitchen staff member she had belittled. Each apology seemed to physically pain her, like swallowing tiny shards of her shattered pride. But the real moment of truth came with Emma. "Emma, sweetheart," Diane knelt down, her $15,000 dress pulling around her. "I am so sorry for how I treated you. Your place cards are beautiful, and I was wrong to throw them away." Emma, showing more grace than her aunt ever had, simply nodded. "It's okay. I can make more. Maybe ones that show who people really are, not who they pretend to be." Several of the bridesmaids tried to hide their smiles. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. "The wedding will proceed," I announced to the gathered crowd. "But with some changes. Emma will be the flower girl, as originally planned before Diane decided she wasn't suitable. And those lovely place cards will be used, each one hand-painted by the resort owner's daughter." Diane's face went through several interesting colors before settling on a sickly pale shade. "Of course," she managed to squeak. As the guests began filing in for the ceremony, I pulled James aside. "You knew this would happen, didn't you? That's why you insisted on having the wedding here." My brother smiled sheepishly. Diane needed to learn that our family doesn't measure worth by bank accounts or social status. What better way than letting her discover her simple sister-in-law owns the very ground she walks on? The wedding proceeded, though not quite as Diane had planned. Every time she began to slip back into her entitled behavior, a quiet word from me or a meaningful glance would deflate her immediately. It was amazing how quickly someone could change when their perfectly crafted social image was at stake. During the reception, Emma's place cards drew countless compliments. Guests marveled at the detail, the artistic talent, and most importantly, the heart behind each one. Diane sat at the main table, watching as her carefully constructed facade crumbled around her. "Mrs. Torres," Marcus approached me near the end of the evening. "The staff wanted you to know this was better than any bonus they could have received." I smiled, watching Emma teach some of the younger guests how to paint with watercolors at a hastily arranged art table. Sometimes the best lessons come with the heaviest price tags. As the night wound down, Diane approached me one last time. Her makeup was slightly smeared, her perfect hair showing signs of wear. "I didn't just wrong Emma and the staff, did I?" she said quietly. "I've been horrible to you since the day we met, all because because you thought money and status were all that mattered." I finished for her. "The question is, what have you learned?" She looked around at the resort, at the staff who had created this perfect day despite her behavior, at Emma still happily painting with her new friends. "That I have a lot of growing to do if I want to be worthy of this family." "Good answer," I nodded. "Your first test starts tomorrow. You'll be spending 1 week working alongside our staff, learning exactly what it takes to create the luxury experience you so casually demanded." "But our honeymoon has been rescheduled." James appeared beside her. "Consider this your first marriage lesson, honey. In this family, we earn our place." As they left for their room, Emma came running up with her last watercolor of the night. It showed our entire family, including Diane, all wearing the resort's staff uniforms. "Look, Mom, I painted Aunt Diane's future." I hugged my daughter close, remembering another young girl who once started at the bottom of a resort, dreaming of more. Sometimes, sweetie, the best revenge isn't showing people how powerful you are. It's teaching them why power isn't what matters at all. Emma nodded wisely. "That's why you let her be mean all morning." "That's right, because sometimes people need to see themselves clearly before they can change." "Did you learn that when you were building your hotels?" I smiled, thinking of my own journey from housekeeper to owner. "No, sweetheart. I learned that from your father. He always said true class isn't about what you own. It's about how you treat others." Together we watched the last guest depart, the stars twinkling over the Mediterranean. Tomorrow, Diane would begin her education in humility. But tonight, we had taught an even more valuable lesson. Never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns the entire library.